Keir Starmer, Jeremy Corbyn led Labour to a disastrous defeat, the worst for 85 years. Yet you won't utter a word of criticism against him. Why can't you be honest and tell us what you really think of how he led the Labour Party?
Well, it was a devastating defeat. You're absolutely right about that. The worst for a very long time.
85 years.
We've actually lost 4 in a row, and therefore, whilst we're analysing why we lost that election, we need to bear in mind we've lost 4 in a row.
But this is the one you really lost.
Oh, no, we really did. And I went out with 44 campaigning teams, and that discussion was there in every team, in every constituency.
So why not a word of criticism of the man who led you to that defeat?
Well, the things that came up on the doors of 44 constituencies were, number one, the leadership. Absolutely. Secondly, the Brexit position. Right. That came up differently in different areas. What was said in the Midlands was different to what was said in Scotland. The overload of the manifesto, people felt there was too much in it. And I'm sad to say, in a number of areas, anti-Semitism came up. So the leadership did come up.
Number one, you say.
Yeah.
But you won't criticise it.
Well, it's not I won't criticise him. Jeremy...
Well, you haven't.
Well, Jeremy is stepping down. We're now asking the question who should be the next leader of the Labour Party, and I'm trying to answer that question. And that requires us to define what the task is, which is huge, a massive challenge.
Which we're going to talk about.
And to ask the members, put myself before the members, to win that competition.
Charlie Faulkner, fellow Labour lawyer, he's known you for years.
I know Charlie very well, yeah.
Yeah, he says, and he knows you very well, and he says the truth is you were, quote, appalled by the awfulness of the Corbyn leadership. Is he right?
Well, look, I was in the shadow cabinet and I challenged in the shadow cabinet where I thought I should challenge. I don't speak outside the shadow cabinet.
Were you appalled by the awfulness of Mr. Corbyn?
We obviously got it very wrong in that general election. Jeremy has stepped down, and we're now looking for the next leader of the Labour Party.
Well, let me tell you what a lot of people, because you're reluctant to say what Charlie Faulkner thinks you think, and that is you're reluctant because a large part of the Labour membership still worships Jeremy Corbyn. You're frightened to say anything critical because it will cost you votes in this election. That's the real truth. It's a calculation.
It's not the truth. I served Jeremy for 3.5 years in his shadow cabinet. I worked well with him. He actually led us through some really difficult times. I had disputes with Jeremy, things I didn't agree with him on, and we either had it out around the shadow cabinet table, or on occasion I went to his constituency office and we had a discussion there. So I know what I agreed with Jeremy, but the question now is not what's the criticism of Jeremy, it's who's the best leader to take us from where we are now to where we need to go. And I've been running a very... Now, to just answer your point, I've been running a very positive campaign, actually, not criticising Jeremy, but not criticising the other candidates, because I profoundly believe that if our party can't pull together and unify, then we're going to carry on losing. And therefore, what I want is to unify the party so that we can be in a position to move forward.
And we'll look
I don't think sort of thrashing around and blaming X, Y, and Z.
But if you have nothing bad to say about, and I would suggest to you, you cannot plan the future without understanding the past. And if you have nothing bad to say about Mr. Corbyn's leadership now, why did you take part in the attempt to topple him as leader in 2016? Well,
in the immediate aftermath of the referendum, I thought we needed a change, and I set out my reasons for it. We then had a leadership election. Jeremy won it convincingly. I accepted the members had put him in as leader, and I then served him for the next 3.5 years.
You said it was simply untenable to suggest that we can offer an effective opposition without a change of leader. Untenable.
But we then went through a process, agonising process over the summer of 2016. Jeremy won convincingly, and I took the decision that in those circumstances, the right thing to do was to serve in the shadow cabinet, particularly on a brief such as the Brexit brief, which was so important. I'm not, I think that was the right thing to do. I then...
Well, maybe you were right, because it did turn out to be untenable. You got thumped in the election with Mr. Corbyn.
Well, I accept that, and that is why we're now having this contest to find out who should be the next leader of the Labour Party. But I'm going to defend the fact that I was in the shadow cabinet. I thought it was the right thing to do. I thought we should be an effective opposition, particularly on Brexit. And having decided to do that, what I didn't do was act in the shadow cabinet and privately brief against Jeremy or anybody else.
Yeah, but you talk now a lot about how the party needs unity and that you want to be the unity candidate. I mean, nearly all candidates, when they're candidates, talk about that. But when you rejoined the shadow cabinet, you continue to undermine Mr. Corbyn. When he was trying to hold the party together on Brexit, a really difficult thing, you said you went your own way. You said, I'm going to campaign for Remain come what may. You undermined his attempt to try and get unity.
Andrew, that is utter nonsense.
Well, what bit of it's wrong?
Utter nonsense. Firstly, I made the speech on triggering Article 50 in the Chamber, where I said we accept the result and we want a deal. That was a very difficult speech. It was said with the full support of the shadow cabinet, and we then spent 2 years trying to get a deal. I don't know how many times I put.
But by January
down.
2019, you told Andrew Marr, "I will campaign for in, and I will vote for in." That was not Mr. Corbyn's collective policy.
That was when we had got to the point of saying we'd have a second referendum.
No, actually, I'm sorry, Mr. Starmer, that's not true. What you said that a month before having a second referendum was Labour Party policy. You broke ranks even before that.
Andrew, you're wrong about that. The way we decided this was in the shadow cabinet or in subcommittees, and I talked to Jeremy about it.
Hold on, because the facts do matter. You're a lawyer, so you will know facts matter. You said on January 2019, I will campaign for in and I will vote for in. The Labour Party did not back a referendum until February 2019, a month later, so I'm not wrong.
We were having those discussions. We had already had lots of discussions in shadow cabinet, and Jeremy was very relaxed about people saying which way they would vote in this. And there's no point you putting to me as if there's some issue between me and Jeremy. Jeremy and I work together on our Brexit policy, and if you interview him at some stage, you can ask him all these questions and ask him whether you thought
he wasn't going to campaign for Remain. But let's move on.
Because Jeremy and I didn't agree completely on this, but that's why we. But when we had these difficult situations, we thrashed it out around the shadow cabinet table and agreed lines, and I stuck to those lines. When I thought there was a need for a more personal discussion, I went to see Jeremy in his constituency office, and we had a very good discussion. So actually, in fairness to Jeremy and to me, we actually worked very effectively together, and we sorted out our differences.
All right.
In a sensible way. So now suggesting that they're there is not
Can you
right.
give me one tough message from you in this campaign that the Corbyn left would find unpalatable?
Well, that we have to unite the party, and that means taking people wherever they are.
Everybody wants to unite the party.
Well, everybody wants to unite the party, but you've got to model unity. What I'm doing in my campaign is I've got people from different parts of the party on my campaign working together, because I know that simply saying unity isn't enough. Everybody's going to say
that's not unpalatable. What I'm asking you is a position you're taking that the Corbyn left will find unpalatable.
Well, I'm not particularly interested in finding things that they find palatable or unpalatable. I'm setting out my positive case. I'm saying we need to unite the party, we need to be a very effective opposition against Boris Johnson, and we need to unrelentingly focus on winning that next general election. So my pitch to our members is not who can I pick fights with, who can I say palatable or unpalatable things to. I'm setting out positively what I think we need to do.
But the reason I ask you that is that many suspect in the Labour Party that you are the Neil Kinnock of this leadership contest, that you're running from the left on a kind of broadly Corbynista ticket, but if you win, you'll move to the right. Are they wrong?
Andrew, I am very focused on what are the challenges now in 2020, after the defeats we've been through. How do we meet those challenges and prepare a manifesto probably for 2024 that speaks to the 2020s and the 2030s? And therefore, I'm not trying to be a past Labour leader. I want to be the next Labour leader.
But 80% of Labour Party members in a poll think that you would move the party towards the centre.
Well, I've seen that poll. I have set out my case. This is how we conduct ourselves in our party, week after week, hustings after hustings in front of our members.
You're not getting your message through if they think you would move to the centre.
I am making my pitch to the members, and they will make their minds up over the next few weeks who they want to lead the Labour Party.
Why haven't you declared all the major donors who are funding your leadership campaign?
Well, at the beginning of the campaign, the Labour Party set out the rules that we should all comply with, and they briefed us on it. And they involve doing the necessary checks on any donations, and then passing it to the parliamentary authorities so that they can be published. And I'm following those rules.
But that's process. There's
Well, no, that's not process, that's
well,
the
you're
rules.
following the process, but there's a bigger principle at stake, that Labour Party members who are being asked to vote for you should know who's bankrolling your campaign.
That is why the Labour Party set up those rules.
But you won't tell us.
The Labour Party rules say, carry out the checks, which we have to carry out, and I've got a compliance team doing that. Once you're satisfied the checks are carried out and the donations are proper in order, they go to the parliamentary authorities who put them on the parliamentary website so that everybody can see them. I've been following that procedure. That is exactly the parliamentary
But the other
rules.
candidates in this contest have published who is bankrolling their campaign. You seem to be hiding behind this process. Why won't you simply tell us tonight who are your 5 biggest donors?
Andrew, how can you say I'm hiding behind a process when it's the Labour Party process? The Labour Party, beginning of
Because you're hiding behind the process.
No, the Labour Party
Why
said-
don't you do what the other candidates do and tell? Don't Labour members have a right,
Well-
as they decide whether to vote for you or not, they want to know where your money's coming from?
I've been asked that many times. I've said it's coming from trade unions, from crowdfunding, from individual donations.
Who's your biggest donor?
It's coming from those three. One of my biggest donors was put up on the website, I think, yesterday.
Right,
or
that's
the day
one of the lawyer.
Yes.
That's the law. But who are your 5 biggest donors?
Well-
you haven't announced. You've only announced about £125,000 worth of donations. This campaign costs a lot more than that. Doesn't transparency just demand? I mean, it's causing you a problem. Len McCluskey, the union leader, he said that you are having secret financiers sitting in the shadows. And you laugh, I understand that.
Nonsense.
You could solve that tonight by saying, when I leave here, everybody who's bankrolled my campaign, I will make public.
Well, of course, Andrew.
But you're not going to do that.
Andrew, please hear me out. I've got a compliance team in place who are checking that every donation is in accordance with the rules. Once they've done that, they pass it to the parliamentary authorities for them to publish it. So 2 lots have gone up. Another lot is again with the parliamentary authorities as of today. I'm following the rules so that everything can be published.
So just to be clear, who's giving you £100,000?
This line of attack on me that I'm following the rules, which the Labour Party at the beginning of the exercise said, right, how was...
Okay, who's giving you more than 100,000?
The Labour Party at the beginning of the exercise said, these are the rules as to what you've got to check.
Who's giving you more than £100,000?
These are the rules as to publication. Nobody's given me more than 100,000. That biggest donation went up yesterday or the day before.
And how much is that?
Was it 100,000?
100,000?
Yes.
So that's your biggest?
Yes.
All right. Let's come on to policy. You made 10 policy pledges for this campaign. Let's see how watertight they are. Can you guarantee that under your leadership, the 2019 Labour commitments to nationalise water, energy, rail, the Royal Mail, they'll all be in Labour's next election manifesto?
I've made that commitment. The pledges I've made indicate the direction of travel, but I am well aware that there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done between now and 2024, because that 2024 manifesto has to reflect the state of the nation in 2024 and face the late 2020s.
And things change. I understand.
Well,
I understand
a lot
that,
of things
and I
will
don't
change.
want you. I'm not asking you to write the manifesto, but those 4 industries will be in the Labour manifesto for nationalisation come 2024.
They will. They're baseline indicators of where we're going. I think that we'll need to think about how we do it. Well, they will be. They are. What I'm saying to the members here is we need to build the case from where we are now to 2024. Lots of things are going to change between now and 2024. It's not unlikely that we'll be leaving the EU without a deal. We don't know what the state of the economy will be. Manufacturing could well take a hit. So we're going to have to craft that 2024 manifesto looking forward. My pledges are an indication to our members as to what I think is important, the direction of travel and what we will build
Keir
on.
Starmer, a pledge is not an indication. A pledge is a word, is your word. It's a pledge.
I'm not disputing that. I don't have any problem.
So is it a pledge that these industries will be in your manifesto for nationalisation?
Yes, it is. The point I'm making to you is the manifesto will have to have a lot more than that.
Of course, I understand
This is not a manifesto.
Well, what
This is a
about
starting
university
position.
tuition fees then? Will you remain committed to scrapping them in
They're
your first
all
term?
pledges, Andrew. So the answer to these questions is yes.
So university tuition fees being scrapped will be in a Starmer manifesto?
Yes, that's why it's
The
a
next
pledge.
election? OK. Why then doesn't the Labour left trust you?
Well, I'm asking members to vote for me in this election. We will find out on the 4th of April what the members have decided. And I am very happy making my case to our members and obviously letting them decide.
You pledged that you would strengthen workers' rights
I did.
by repealing the 2016 Trade Union Act. Would you go further and repeal all the union laws passed since Mrs Thatcher?
Well, I would repeal all of those that inhibit collective action. There's been a lot of provisions since then, most of them in trade
Well, they
union
nearly
acts,
all
but
do.
not all of them. Well, nearly all of them do. But
So
you'd
would
have
you
to go
repeal them
through.
all?
I'd repeal all of those provisions, whether in those acts or other acts, that inhibit collective
It's not
action.
in your pledge.
Well, the pledge is 3 lines, Andrew. You're asking me for more detail, and I'm giving it to you.
Well, but the fact is the 2016 Trade Union Act, when it comes to cribbing and curtailing union power, is not the key legislation. The key legislation that does that was passed a long time before, and your pledge doesn't mention any of that.
Well, the pledge is very clearly that I will take whatever is necessary to stand with our trade unions, and I stand by that pledge.
You're a big Remainer. I mean, I know the argument's kind of over now, I understand that, but you were a staunch Remainer in that, and you were consistent in that too. But doesn't that mean you're the last person to rebuild the red wall that Labour saw knocked down in December?
Well, Andrew, the first thing I should say is I voted to trigger Article 50. I then spent 2 years trying to find a deal that we could leave the EU on. I then actually voted in the indicative votes for a deal we could leave on. So we never even got to the question of a second referendum until we'd been through all of that process. Now, in those seats, where I spent a lot of time talking to people and to MPs and councillors who represent people, then of course Brexit was a big issue, but it wasn't the only issues. And the truth is, in some of those seats and the surrounding seats, we've been losing them for many, many years. And the idea that we would have won this election in December 2019, but for Brexit, I just think he's wrong.
Well, Gareth Snell was a Labour MP for Stoke.
Yeah.
Not anymore. He lost. He says he personally begged you to rethink the referendum policy. But he said he was ignored, in his words, because you thought being popular with the membership was more important to you than holding parliamentary seats. He sees you as a key reason for the defeat in December.
Well, Andrew, Gareth has his own view. What I can tell you is that members of Parliament in those seats, Toby Perkins in Chesterfield, Jenny Chapman, who lost her seat in Darlington, Emma Hardy in Hull, are all supporting me in this campaign, and they're all very close to their communities.
But what
so I know what Gareth said.
Right.
But look, one of the things...
And others say that something
let me
different.
finish, because that's a fair challenge to me. No. So what I've been trying to show in my campaign is that I do have the support and the backing of representatives, MPs, those who were MPs, and councillors and others in the very communities that make up what we're calling the Red Wall. I myself have actually spent quite a lot of time in those seats because I think it's important to do so. And I've done that over the last 3.5 years, had gritty conversation. And once we've got beyond the gritty conversation, and I've said to people, what are the 2 or 3 things you really want me to look at on the train on the way home? They said, we need infrastructure and transport, we need jobs with real dignity and security, and we want decisions about us made by us. So I've actually, for the last 3.5 years, had those conversations in those communities, because I know very well that in my constituency we voted heavily for Remain.
Of course.
And that's why I have been to a lot of other places to have those conversations.
Or what's left of the Red Wall, which isn't much, that the conversations weren't gritty enough because you now want free movement with the European Union to continue.
Well, we talked a lot about free movement in those areas.
And you want it to continue.
Actually, when we had the discussion, again, got past the gritty bit, and there's a lot of respect people have when you do have a conversation with them. There's a lot said by people about what people think. Actually, I would say go and spend some time and actually have those conversations. when we got to the nitty-gritty of it, which is, should people in this country be able to go and work in Europe? Should those in Europe be able to come to work here? Most people thought that was a good idea. When we got to, should families be able to live together, broadly speaking, most people agreed with that. And when we got to, should people in this country be able to study in Europe? And should people from Europe be able... Now,
and all that adds up to free movement.
Around that, but Andrew, you're missing my point. In those communities where I had those discussions, actually, we were. I'm not saying everybody.
So people up there who voted Tory, used to vote Labour, voted Tory, immigration being a big issue, they're now all in favour of free movement. Have you been listening to the Red Wall?
I have. I'm trying to explain to you what I've been doing for the last 3 years, which is actually going and having those conversations and getting past the soundbite, do you want immigration, yes, no, and having a discussion going on often for an hour or so about the sorts of things that matter to people. And I've done that out of real respect and wanting to engage with people. Because if in the end it just boils down to, do you want immigration, yes, no, we're going absolutely nowhere.
But almost 4 years ago, you were talking about the need to reduce immigration.
Yes, I was.
You said, I think, now you're talking about free movement. I mean, it doesn't seem that you've learned any lesson from this at all.
You keep putting this to me, and I keep saying...
That's my point.
I know, but you're not listening to what I'm saying, because I have... One of the ways I operate, and have done now since 2015 when I came into Parliament, is to go to the very communities where I need to listen, and listen. And that's what I've been doing.
You had a big job before you went into politics, Director of Public Prosecutions.
Yes.
And you've used that because it says it helps qualify you for leadership. You've done something as big as that, and many others have not. But it's also made some question your judgment. In 2013, you issued new guidance on how to determine the credibility of allegations in paedophile cases. And it was clear something had to change after the Jimmy Savile case and all the rest of it. But you put much more store on giving people who claimed they were victims the benefit of the doubt, believing them to be credible. And many people feel this led to a witch hunt against wholly innocent people.
Let me then explain how those guidelines came about. We were actually dealing with some of the grooming gangs up in the northwest. And it came to my attention that some of those that we were now going to charge with very serious offences had previously been arrested but not charged. So I asked to see the file because the question was, well, if there's offences of this serious, why weren't they charged? When I looked into the file, I saw that we were dealing there with girls 13, 14, 15 who had been passed around between men in the most appalling circumstances. I looked into the file and what I saw was good faith decisions made by the police and prosecutors using assumptions about credibility. So they were asking themselves, did this person go straight to the police and tell them what had happened? And the reality was none of these victims had. Did the victim go back to the perpetrator? And the answer was they did. Have the victims been involved in crime? Hit me out. In crime or drugs? And the answer was yes. So the assumptions that were being made in the criminal justice system
need to be changed.
Were assumptions that, if you like, were there for the model victim that does. We now know that in rape cases and serious sexual offences, it is highly unlikely, in most cases, that somebody will go straight to the police. It's highly unlikely. And yet the test that we were applying was questioning, well, if you don't go straight...
And as I said,
so
I understand why
needed to be
changes. I understand that.
We reset credibility.
But it had consequences that might have been unforeseen, but were really serious and destroyed people's lives, reputations besmirched, never to be restored again. The radio presenter, Paul Gambaccini, one of those arrested due to false allegations by a so-called victim. His home was raided. He went through a year of torment before he was exonerated. He blames you. He's a Labour supporter. He blames you for, quote, ruining countless lives.
Paul Gambaccini was a case that never crossed my desk. He was... his file came to the CPS after I stepped down from office. Now, I know Paul feels very strongly...
because of the change of rules,
he feels very strongly that I was somehow involved. As it happens, I had stepped down when his case came to the CPS. I've never seen his file.
He says Keir Starmer is not only unsuitable to be leader of the Labour Party, he's unsuitable for any public position, down to and including dog catcher. He serves only himself and not the people. Well, people are upset by this.
Well,
That might be unfair.
Those
but
guys,
they are upset.
Hear me out. I've said why I published the guidelines. I then consulted on the guidelines widely. And they've been in the public. They're now changed because various things have happened along the way. But they were there for public scrutiny, to be challenged, and they were applied in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases to good effect. And I'm not going to have this suggestion that the system was absolutely fine because
which nobody is.
Jimmy Savile,
which I began with.
Jimmy Savile, whilst he was alive, 2 women came forward to make allegations against him in Surrey and Sussex. Neither of them knew that the other existed, and no prosecutions were brought.
I understand. That's why the rules had to be changed.
Because the rules were set in completely the
But I
wrong
simply
place.
was pointing out to some of the unforeseen consequences. Anyway,
I know. Look, Paul Gambaccini thinks that I was responsible for his case. And I have no disrespect to him at all.
We're
but
coming to
he's
the
factually
end.
wrong because I'd actually stepped down from office.
Let me try and frame this in a way. I mean, Labour, sometimes you don't really get this sense, but you have a mountain to climb to win the next election. I mean, arithmetically, it's never been done before. Nobody's gone from the number of seats you have to winning an overall majority. Given the scale of this mountain, doesn't it need a leader with charisma, with zeal, fire in their belly, someone who can inspire, rally the troops? And nobody could mistake any of that for you.
Well, Andrew, it needs someone who can unite our party and bring it together. It needs someone who can effectively take on Boris Johnson at the dispatch box. And it needs someone unrelentingly focused on winning that general election. And there are different ways to inspire people. You can inspire people so they want to sit at your feet, listening to your next word. That's not me. Or you can inspire people by building a team of people who want to come with you on a journey and change their party and their country. That is what I'm building in my campaign. We've got a huge campaign, a very positive campaign, because people want to come on this journey. That's the way I want to inspire people, which is not to say get behind me or listen to me, sit at my feet. It's get alongside me. We have to take responsibility for the next leg of the journey, this next 4.5 years, and it's up to us to change our party and our country. People are hearing that in my campaign. We've got hundreds of people out
and they've heard it tonight, and I'm going to have to cut you short because we've got more interviews to do. But Keir Starmer, thank you for being with us.